wait in anticipation for these 10 days to come. And it's amazing that despite the fact that it cuts us and it makes us cry, but there's an anticipation there. There's a feeling there. You're waiting for this moment to come so that you can pour your heart out. You can reconnect again. On the one hand, you feel grief, but at the same time, you feel happiness as well. The question is asked, why is this? Why is it that on the one hand, you're feeling grief, but again, you're feeling happiness? Go and see today. Look across the world. Mothers are preparing their children tonight. As you come home from school, you find that mothers say to their kids, from now on, the next 10 days are going to be crucial. Black clothes are worn. The entire atmosphere of your house changes. Mosques are flooded. People begin to move. There's a movement now. You don't care anymore, day or night time. For the next 10 days, everything inside of you is pointing to one reality, and that's the reality of Sayyid al-Shuhada alayhi salam. As the time of the Dhuhr goes closer, and as we're moving closer to that Imam alayhi salam, this message holds true, and this is the only message that will make us survive these trials and tribulations which this nation is going through. Look and see for yourself. See how quickly time is accelerating. See how quickly pain and suffering is coming into our lives. One of the greatest secrets of these 10 nights isn't the fact that you come and shed tears only for Sayyid al-Shuhada, because the Imam doesn't require our tears. The actual sir, the secret of these nights is that we use these nights to change our destiny. It is within these nights that you change your destiny. All of that pain that you brought here, every one of us has some pain within our heart. It's that pain that drives us. Each one of us are suffering because we're human beings. Allah gives us one opportunity, time and time again, and that opportunity is the wasila of these 10 nights, that you can come here and that you can cry. Go back to the tradition of the fourth Imam alayhi salam and see. Beautiful as he says. He says, look, even if all of the problems of the world befall you and you feel like crying and those tears come into your eyes, and you know some problems that we have, either as family problems or financial or health, whatever it may be, just make the intention that when you cry for my Father, and see He's accepted in this way. Every movement, every tear, every pain that you feel, make that intention, and you see that your heart feels lighter again. That's what this night is about. This night is that night of preparation. This night is that night that we prepare ourselves, that we can make that difference in the next 10 nights. Leading on to the day of Ashura. All of your problems, everything lies here. Solution for everything lies here. And that's why each one of us needs to get on the ark of Sayyid al-Shuhada alayhi salam. And so tonight starts off that process. Tonight we make a covenant. If you're here tonight, it's because you were invited. Not everyone comes to these centers. Not everyone comes to these majalis. If you're here, it's because you're the dua of Zahra. That's why you're here. Look at yourself and see. Don't look at your status as something small. Look at your status and see that it's because of that mother who prayed for this nation. That's why you're here today. And that's what makes the difference. For those people who realize their status, you find that not only in this world, but in the hereafter, you will have one. Beneficial for you. These are those nights. That's Sayyid al-Shuhada that all of humanity remembers. And look and see, has there been such a sacrifice like this? You know, I remember a number of years ago in the BBC, there was an entire documentary done that across the world who commemorates Sayyid al-Shuhada. You find that fire within us is greater, but all religions, somewhere or somehow, commemorate Sayyid al-Shuhada. For you, there's a connection, because the Imam alayhi salam, the 12th Imam says, he says, our Shia are those people who feel our pain when we're in pain, and we feel their pain when they're in pain. Don't ever think that you're alone. Don't ever think that you don't have anyone to support you. Every time you pain, your Imam pains as well. But it's that realization that needs to be there. And for every time the Imam pains, you pain. This is why you feel that harara, that fire within your heart, that the Imam alayhi salam has said, that the death of Sayyid al-Shuhada will be like a fire in the hearts of the believers. They'll never die away. That's why you're here for today. That's what pushes you, that fire within your heart. But it's not just us that commemorates Sayyid al-Shuhada. Go across the world and see. And that's what the BBC was saying in this documentary. They said, look, even if you go to Lebanon today, you find that there are Christians who commemorate Sayyid al-Shuhada. Ask why, and they'll tell you that this Imam represents humanity. For everything that's within humanity is found within us, in this Imam. Why did the Imam go out and do what he did? You know and I know that the Imam was destined for heaven anyway. But the reason why he went there and the reason why he gave his life was for one thing, to prove to humanity that there's still humanity left. If Imam Hussein didn't stand up and rise, it would have meant that there was no humanity within society left. It takes a man like him to stand up and to sacrifice his life, to show that within our fitrah, the biggest thing which is there is love and sincerity. And that's what you see that man, that on the day of Ashura when he stands there is love and sincerity drenched and flowing within him. That when he raises his hands to Allah on the day of Ashura, everyone is gone and there's no one remaining. But he looks up to us as creator and he says, Allah, do you accept me now? Are you satisfied with me now after having lost everything with all the burden in his heart? And then he says, Allah, take until you are satisfied. That is a man of sincerity and that's a man of love. See, why is it that his name is alive today? Ponder over it, think about it. Great people have come and gone. You see, in the last 15 years or so, we've seen the likes of Mother Teresa come and go. If you were to ask anyone, who is Mother Teresa? She was a great woman. But how many people know the day that she passed away on? Go back to our native country, which is the United Kingdom. We had Diana, she passed away, right? 2 million people came to her funeral. Today, if you ask half of those people, what day did she die? Nobody knows about that. They don't remember that. Within the fitrah of man, you find that when it comes to pain, slowly but surely, as they say, either it kills you or it makes you stronger. Our mechanism means that we cope and we survive. If I was to ask you, who's your great-grandfather, many of us wouldn't know. And even if you did know what day did he die, most of us wouldn't know. Why? Why is that? It's a process. And you find that pain slowly relieves itself over a period of time. For those people's parents who aren't here, those first years are critical, right? But 10, 15 years, it becomes stable then. The grief is there, the pain is there, but it becomes stable. But now look towards that pain of Sayyid al-Shuhada. If I was to ask you, do you know how he looks like? No. Do you know how tall he was? No. Do you know what color eyes he had? No. Do you know what time he would sit down with his family? No. What is it that we know about him then? In the terms of physical features, we don't know anything about him other than what's written in the books. So what is it that attracts you towards him? Why is it that it burns your heart when it comes to his tragedy? That in itself is a miracle. Regardless of anything, 1400 years later, if he's commemorated from these pulpits, and if millions of people come to commemorate Sayyid al-Shuhada, that means that it's a miracle. Because within our humanity and our fitrah is dictated that we forget this type of pain. 1400 years later, if millions of people are coming, that means Hussein won and Yazid lost. See, that means that there is a system in place. That's the living miracle. That's the miracle of Sayyid al-Shuhada. We don't know how he looked like, but we know his principles. Why is he timeless today? Why do tears come into your eyes when we mention his name? Timeless, because of Allah. One thing Imam had that none of us have in the same way as the Imam, and that was sincerity. The more sincere you are, the more timeless you become. You see, sincerity isn't something physical. We as human beings are consistent of two things, the physical body and the soul. The soul is immaterial. It lives on and it continues to live on. The sincerity of Sayyid al-Shuhada is such that it's timeless. And every time that energy is felt, look at that energy, right? 3 weeks ago, I was on the Hajj. As we were going into Mina, when you heard people shouting, Labbaika ya Hussein, it's like an energy that comes within you. The name of Sayyid al-Shuhada today brings revolutions. When the Shia nation is oppressed, there is one thing that comes onto their lips, and that's Labbaika ya Hussein. And if you look at that power that's generated, if you look at the passion that's generated, revolutions have been made within his name. Go into the 20th century and see some of the greatest revolutions, whether it was within Iran, whether it's within Lebanon, whether it was within Iraq, whether even within its Pakistan, even within those formative years in the 80s, if there were revolutions were made in the name of Sayyid al-Shuhada. And today, if you look at us as well, you find that we will do anything within our power to preserve that. So go and ask those Christians of Lebanon, and they'll say the same thing in this documentary they said. They said one thing, Sayyid al-Shuhada represents humanity. For everything that he did, it shows that there's humanity left. And they went then to Israel as well, and they interviewed Jews within Tel Aviv, and they asked them, this is, what is it that drives you? Why is it that you cry? And this isn't our news. This is news which is found on the BBC. Iraqi Jews within Tel Aviv. They said, well, look, we're from Iraq. We've seen the miracles on the shrine of Sayyid al-Shuhada. How is it possible that we don't go towards him? I remember a couple of months back when the day came for Imam Musa al-Qadhim alayhi salam, commemoration, and they were Iraqi. And they were Iraqi Jews who said that we commemorate this because we were from that region. We understand the status of the Imams. You see, the Imams are timeless. We've restricted them only to Islam. But the benefits of the Imam goes through all of cultures. But you know, the interesting thing is when they went to India and they asked the Brahmins, there's a special caste amongst the Brahmins. You know, there's 4 castes, right, within India. One of them is the Brahmins. There's a branch of the Brahmins known as the Hussaini Brahmins. And they were asked, why do you commemorate Sayyid al-Shuhada? I remember 10 years ago within London itself that there used to be Hindus and Sikhs who would come to South London and North London and they would beat their chests and they would cry for Sayyid al-Shuhada. And you ask them, why is that? And they'd give you the story. According to their traditions, in the same way that we have our riwayat, they have their riwayat. According to their riwayat, you find that there was a king in India and that king had a wife. His wife and Imam Hussein's wife were sisters. And therefore they say that Imam Zain al-Abidin is actually our nephew. It says that the king of Persia had a number of sisters. One of them was married to Sayyid al-Shuhada. One of them was married, for example, to Imam Hassan alayhi salam. It says one of them was married to Muhammad ibn Abi Bakr. For example, it says one of them was married to our king. And it says that Imam Zain, and according to them, not according to us, it says Imam Zain al-Abidin writes a letter. And he says that I'm stranded amongst these people and these people are willing to overcome us. Come and help us. He says that we were those Brahmins who went from India. By the time we came to Karbala, we'd realized that Sayyid al-Shuhada had been killed. You Muslims killed him. We Hindus stood up for him. This is why every year, year in, year out, we come for the commemoration of Sayyid al-Shuhada. And that's why my mind goes to a particular story. That takes place in 2007. I remember a friend of mine, he was in India at the time, in a city known as Lucknow. And most of you know where that city is, right? He says that in Lucknow, he says that there were 17,000 Hindus who came for the procession of Sayyid al-Shuhada. He says within that procession, he says there was a man. And the man was from the warrior caste. 4 castes, right? Brahmins, the priest caste. Second caste is the warrior caste. You know what he says? He says that we've heard from our ancestors that whoever comes under the flag of Abul Fadl and whatever they ask for comes true. This man goes under the flag. And living examples are there, right? Story comes into mind, and as it comes into my mind, I'll tell you, and then I'll move back onto the story. You know the country Pakistan, right? Pakistan itself was founded by Muhammad Ali Jinnah. And you know him because he was a Khoja from Bombay. So Pakistan was founded by a Khoja from Bombay. Now Muhammad Ali Jinnah's great-grandmother was a Hindu, right? And she converted later on, she became Ismaili, and then after that she became Ithna Ashari. Story goes like this. It says that his grandmother had 11 sons. 11 of them died. And if you go to the biographies, you'll see this. 11 sons died. It says the final son lived though. Why? Because within our aqidah was that if you go to the horse, which is the Dhuljana, and you know within the Indo-Pak culture, they have a horse that they take out on the day of Ashura. It says she went onto the horse and she grabbed it. She says that you represent the horse of Sayyid al-Shuhada. She grabs it and she says, for the sake of Sayyid al-Shuhada, give me a son and I'll name him after you. 9 months later, Allah gave her a son. She named him Dhuljana. He had a son. He named him Muhammad Ali Dhuljana, but it was too heavy, so he became Muhammad Ali Jinnah. Look at that, that's the power of Sayyid al-Shuhada. And that's not something which is hidden, that's something which is history. So in this way, 2007, this man comes, Hindu, grabs onto the flag of Abul Fadl and he says, look, I've heard from my ancestors, regardless of the fact that whether we're Hindu or not, we don't need to be Muslims because we know that you're for everyone. Grabs on and he says, oh Abass, give me a son. And now he gets emotional. You know, sometimes we get emotional. He says, Abass, give me a son. If you give me a son, I'll bury you in his way. I'll sacrifice you in his way. And he said it and he left. 9 months later, Allah gave him a son. This is within our generation, not 1,000 years ago or 200 years ago. Within our generation, 6 years ago, Allah gave him a son. You know what he says? He says, that night when Allah gave me a son, I realized why he gave me a son. But I also realized my promise that I'd made to Abul Fadl. He says, fine. What should I do? He says, but after 10 years, Allah's given me a son. He says, no, but I'm from the warrior caste. A man is known by the promises that he makes. He says, fine, I made a promise, I'm going to fulfill that promise. He says, he lifted up the child, and at dead of night, without his mother knowing, he leaves the house. And as he leaves the house, he goes out towards the outskirts of the city where there was a desert. And he goes there, child in his hand, comes close, takes a shovel, starts digging with his own hands. And he digs, and he removes, and he makes a small grave. And tears are in his eyes, and his heart is bursting. And he's thinking to himself after all of these years. But he said, look, I remember that I made a promise, and I'm going to fulfill that promise. He takes the baby, he puts him into the ground, he takes the dirt, and slowly he begins to chuck the dirt on the face of the baby. And the baby is suckling, and the baby is moving, and you can see the love the baby has for his father. It's his natural love. Heavy-hearted, he somehow buries the baby, and as he buries him, he begins to walk. And when he begins to walk, he says, I'd heard that Sayyid al-Shuhada walked 7 times from the tent. He says that as I was going to the door of the house, I stopped and I walked to the front of the street again, and again I walked, and again I walked, and again I walked. He says, there was one thing in my mind. What am I going to say to the child's mother? He says, eventually I picked up the heart. I opened the door and I went inside. And as I went inside, I saw the mother was sitting there with a child in her hand. So I looked at the mother and I said, you disgraced me, woman. He says, why? What did I do? He said, you followed me. He says, no, I didn't. I didn't even know. He says, how'd you have the child? You know what she says? She says, half an hour after you left, there was a knock on the door. When I opened the door, there was a very tall man standing there. The tall man looks at me, he opens up his shawl, and he gives me the baby, and he says, tell your husband, what we give, we don't take back. That's Sayyid al-Shuhada. That's Abul Fadl al-Abbas. These are what those nights are about. Why have you come here, essentially? Because each one of us has something in our mind that we want them to fulfill. If a Hindu can take, why is it that we don't have the power to take? Look and see. Look at the Jew who goes to the shrine of Imam Hussein. Whatever he asks for comes true. Look at the Christian or the Maronite who goes to Imam Musa al-Kadhim, asks for his eyesight, he gets his eyesight back. Why is it today that we as the followers of the Imam don't have that aqeedah within us that we can take whatever we want? You see, some things are irrational. Some things you can't even philosophize on. When you deeply go into philosophy in the same way as the likes of Plato did, or if you go before that Pythagoras, or if you go after that Plotinus, or if you look at some of the Islamic philosophers, they came to a conclusion that there is a reality far beyond the human intellect, and that reality is based upon love. That is emotion. Why is Sayyid al-Shuhada alive today? Because he moves your emotion, and because of the fact that he's the king of hearts. No one's forced you to come here. No one's taken a sword and they've put it to you. If this room is full today, it's because of one reason, and that reason is because he's moved your hearts and he shakes your hearts. That's what makes the difference. Go and see today, who remembers Namrud? Who remembers Fir'aun? How many people come for Yazid? Banu Umayyah, 83 years of tyranny, but today who remembers them? But despite the fact that if you look in the time of Mutawakkil, you see that people were willing to chop their hands and feet off for Sayyid al-Shuhada. In a tradition it says a woman comes in the time of Mutawakkil. She comes in front of one of the soldiers and she says to him, she says, son, I want to go into ziyarah of Hussein. The soldier replies, he says, look, auntie, you're old now. Who's going to help you? Why do you want to go for? Don't you know that you have to chop your right hand off? You know what she says? She says, I'm willing to do that. He takes out a sword. She puts out her left hand. He says, don't you know? Right hand. She says, son, I don't have a right hand anymore. Last year when I came, they chopped off my right hand. Now I'm going for my left hand. That's the power of Sayyid al-Shuhada. Do you know how many of our ancestors, how many of the followers of the Imam have given their arms, their feet, their children, their lives, their property for one thing? Go and look at the tradition of the Imam. In the time of the 6th Imam alayhi salam, if you look at his tradition, Hajj, right, there are certain sharait and shurut. If your life is in danger, if you don't have the money, not this, if that, if the other, you don't need to go. Imam says, sets a precedence. He says, even if your life is in danger, still go to the ziyarah of my judge Sayyid al-Shuhada. There was a time in the time of the 7th Imam where he made it obligatory even. There have been times in the times of the Imams when if you look at it and you find it's difficult to go. Their life is in danger. Their children are being killed. There's an oppression which is taking place. But the Imam alayhi salam says, you must go. This is the one institution that you must keep alive. Go back and see into history and you see the 8th Imam alayhi salam. A day comes, the day of Ashura. He undoes his top, takes off his amama, takes off his shoes. Barefooted, he begins to walk on the streets of Medina. Somebody comes to him and they said, Mala, how long are you going to do this? How long are you going to continue to walk like this? How long are you going to continue to cry like this? You know what the 8th Imam alayhi salam replies? He says one thing though, and look at the hikmah within this. He says, my Shia, the reason why I do this is because I don't want you to forget this institution in the same way as you forgot Ghadir. Had you remembered Ghadir, today this institution would still be there. In fact, there's another statement that's made within history. Had you guys remembered the death of Zahra, today we wouldn't be in the state that we are today. You forgot all of these things, so today we're going to make sure that you don't forget this institution, which is the institution of Sayyid al-Shuhada. That's what makes the difference. Today people look at this and they think, there are only 2 camps left now. There was a very famous Sunni, right? Sunni alim in the 20th century, very famous. Shah Ahmad Nurani. Shah Ahmad Nurani was asked. Somebody came to him and they said to him, are you Shia or you Sunni? And to ask one of the greatest scholars of Ahl Sunnah that were you Shia Sunni. But you know the reply that he gave was groundbreaking. He looks up at the person, he smiles. He says, my friend, after Karbala, there are only 2 parties. Either you're with Yazid or you're with Hussein. I have the pleasure of saying that I'm with Hussein alayhi salam.